Happy weekend, RP fam. Really appreciate you guys spending some time with me. It's Saturday, which means I have start sit coming at you. In today's episode, if you are new and haven't been through it, I'm going over every single position and I have tiers as well. So I'm doing defenses and kickers, top 16, top 25 quarterbacks. For wide receivers and running backs, I'm covering the top 36, trying to highlight some good flex options for you. Tight ends, I do top 16s as well. So I have everything you need in today's episode to get you ready to crush it in week number 5. Big shout out to all of my current subscribers. Thank you guys so much for all of the support. If you haven't done it yet, click that button. Please subscribe and join us. We are so close to hitting 1,000. We are just about to go over the 750 mark. Without any further ado, I'm going to start with my defense and special teams picks. My tier 1, number 1 team are the Baltimore Ravens. They travel to Pittsburgh. They've held opponents to single digits twice already this season. And even with Kenny Pickett playing, I think they have a chance to make it their 3rd in 5 tries. Baltimore is also averaging 4 sacks per game. Number 2 are the New England Patriots, and in tier 2, the San Francisco 49ers lead it off. New Orleans Saints are next at 4, and the Detroit Lions are at 5. They skyrocket up my rankings. Carolina has looked pretty sorry offensively. The Dallas Cowboys are at 6. Risking that game overall, no idea what could happen. Now, likely it's a defensive struggle, but if there are a bunch of points scored, I wouldn't exactly be surprised. Tier 3 starts with the Pittsburgh Steelers at 7, and at 8 I have the New York Jets. They travel to Denver. They have not stood up to the self-created hype thus far, but Denver's offense creates an opportunity to turn it around. They sure as heck aren't the 85 Bears, but they can offer top 10 production this week. Philadelphia is at 9, and tier 4 starts at 10 with the Cincinnati Bengals against Arizona. The Buffalo Bills surprisingly fall for me. I have them at 11. I just have a little bit of a feeling that the Jaguars offensively figure it out at least a little bit. The Miami Dolphins are in at 12. Starting tier 5, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. They have caused a turnover in every game. They're also averaging 2.5 sacks a contest. And guess what? The Minnesota Vikings have struggled mightily with protection, and they've been turning the ball over like crazy. Sometimes 2 + 2 = 4, even in fantasy land. The Indianapolis Colts are at 14, and at 15 I have the Green Bay Packers. My sneaky pick next at 16 are the Houston Texans. They've been a top 10 team thus far, and this is a decent matchup against Atlanta if they can stop the run game. My kickers begin with Jake Elliott, and Tyler Bass is at number 2. Harrison Butker is in at 3. He will produce his 3rd straight top 10 finish. US Bank Stadium offers ideal conditions, both because it is indoors and absolutely beautiful, and also because the Vikings defense also hails there. Tier 2 starts with Jake Moody at 4, and Brandon Aubrey rounds out my top 5. Younghoe Koo is at 6, and Brett Maher is up at 7. Tier 3 dropping down a bit is Justin Tucker. Hasn't been the Justin Tucker that we are accustomed to. My number 9 kicker is Kaimi Fairbairn. Said it right, this guy has racked up 11 field goals in 4 games for the surprising Texans offense. Right now it's hot, so we might as well ride it. I'm going to buy the consistency and opportunities here, especially against a team that just got plastered in London. Matt Gay rounds out my top 10. And my tier 4 begins at 11 with Riley Patterson. Jason Sanders is at 12, and Evan McPherson is at 13. Maybe Cincinnati's offense can turn it around. I want to believe it. Tier 5 begins with Nick Folk. I have Brandon McManus at 15, even against that Buffalo defense. And my last kicker in week 5 is Eddie Pinheiro. This guy's averaging 11 fantasy points per game over his last 3, which honestly blows my mind considering the lack of consistency in that offense in Carolina. But guess what? If it is not broke, do not fix it. That's my kickers for week 5. My quarterback rankings begin with Josh Allen. This man is 1st in passing grade, 4th in yards per attempt, and third in big time throw rate since week number 2. The matchup is better here than it looks on paper as well. Jacksonville's defense will not slow him down. It'll be a big day for Joshy. Patrick Mahomes is up at 2, continues to find a way. Even though he hasn't boomed yet this season, Minnesota is a good opportunity to. Rounding out my top 3, and the last quarterback I have in tier 1 is Tua Tagovailoa. He is that dude. First in passing grade overall, first in yards per attempt, and 6th in fantasy points per dropback. Tua is about to light up New York after shrinking against the Bills. My second tier begins with Anthony Richardson. He has a great matchup with Tennessee. He's going to post his third top 5 finish of the season. The Titans have allowed the 6th highest yards per attempt and passer rating, so AR is going to do it not only on the ground as we are accustomed, but through the air as well. Lamar Jackson is my 5th ranked quarterback, and right after him is Jalen Hurts in a surprisingly tough matchup. In at 7 is Kirk O'Chains. He sits right below his season ranking this week as he faces his toughest test this season. Kansas City is allowing the 4th lowest yards per attempt and the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to the position. They're also top 5 in pressure rate and blitz rate this year. So if Kirko does not show up, it could be a long day for the Vikings and for fantasy owners. However, one way or another, garbage points or not, I think Kirk is going to be fine. He's actually 5th in the NFL in passer rating and fantasy points per dropback against the blitz, so he does not fear what Kansas City brings to the table. Tier 3 begins with Jared Goff, and at 9 it is CJ Stroud, who just keeps skyrocketing up my rankings, now into the top 10 after 3 straight top 13 performances. Over the last 2 weeks, the number 2 overall pick ranks 9th in passing grade and 3rd in yards per attempt. He is making great and smart decisions. He's got the 3rd lowest turnover worthy rate, and he's also been explosive, the 4th highest fantasy points per dropback. The kid is for real, and if Stroud can avoid AJ Terrell this week, he will be just fine. Chase the points here. Stroud has plenty more coming. Jordan Love is up at 10, and he rounds that out, and he also rounds out my 3rd tier. Matthew Stafford is next at 11, and my last QB1 in week 5 is Trevor Lawrence. He is sitting at quarterback 23 right now. He is 6th lowest in the NFL as far as average depth of target. He ranks just 22nd in fantasy points per dropback, and the matchup here is brutal as well. The Bills have surrendered the 2nd lowest pass rating, the 3rd fewest passing touchdowns, and the fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. So in short, T-Law has his work cut out for him. The thing is, I just cannot imagine Lawrence buckling in this game, and my gut is telling me that a breakout game and the potential for it exists here. He is long overdue, and I believe in the talent of this Jacksonville offense. So if you cannot find someone like Stroud, Goff, or Jordan Love off of waivers, then I think the dice roll for Trevor here makes sense. My 5th tier begins with another tumbler. It is Joe Burrow, who has been very, very bad. I do not have to tell any current owners that. But then there's Arizona. The Cards have been feisty overall, but they also made Daniel Jones look like a superhero, which clearly he is not. So they just might be the team that unlocks Joe Cool. Arizona has allowed the 4th highest yards per attempt, the 9th highest passer rating, and the 6th highest adjusted completion rate. They have been awful defending deep passes as well, so if Burrow gets the time and can sling it, owners can finally have something to get excited about. The reward at this point might just outweigh the risk. Russell Wilson is up at 14 against the Jets, and my last quarterback in tier 5 is Brock Purdy. We are going to learn a lot about him this week. Currently, he's ranked 2nd in yards per attempt, 1st in passer rating, 4th in fantasy points per dropback. So in theory, he is going to post close to top 12 numbers yet again. Dallas is going to run man in this game on defense, Purdy has decimated it all year long. He ranks 8th in yards per attempt and passer rating as well, and 9th in fantasy points per dropback against that man coverage. So if Purdy can continue to roll against this Cowboys defense, he's likely going to be a locked-in QB1 option for the rest of the season. Tier 6 has Joshua Dobbs as my Sweet 16. He is a legit high-end streaming option this week. The Bengals have been middling against opposing quarterbacks, and they've also surrendered the 11th highest yards per attempt. Dobbs has been the quarterback 5, 16, and 8 since week number 2. Roll him out there with confidence. Dak Prescott is next at 17, and Jimmy Garoppolo, should he play, double check that, he is at 18. Tier 7 begins with Daniel Jones, who has basically fallen off the face of the earth. Guy has not reached double digits twice all season long. Bench him, bench him, bench him if you can. Derek Carr rounds out my top 20, and at 21 it is Zach Wilson, who jumps a little bit and gets a little bonus because he plays Denver, and he didn't look half bad against the Chiefs. Bryce Young is at 22, 2nd lowest yards per attempt, 5th lowest passer rating, 3rd lowest fantasy points per dropback. These stats do not bring us much hope, and if you don't have better options at this point, I will be praying for you. Ryan Tannehill's at 23, and my 8th and final tier has Mac Jones at 24 and Desmond Ridder at 25. This man is not even worthy of a start in Superflex leagues. Point to a running back or a wide receiver on your roster. Anyone will do, that one or the other one. It doesn't really matter. It will be a better start than Desmond Ridder. Before I get into my running backs, friendly reminder, like the video, subscribe to the channel, help Relentless Press get to 1,000. My number 1 guy at running back, as usual, is Christian McCaffrey, and at 2 I have Bijan Robinson. He's only scored once this year, and yet is still a top 10 back. He's averaging over 18 touches and 110 yards per game, and he leads the Falcons in targets as well. Houston is vulnerable against the run, so Robinson is set up for his best game of the season. The last running back I have in Tier 1 is Derrick Henry. He should smash in the game against the Colts. Tier 2 starts with DeAndre Swift, who has been a monster thus far, averaging 22 touches and over 130 total yards since he took that RB1 role for Philly. Swift has played 70% of the snaps inside the 10-yard line. He also has that goal line role locked in. The Rams are vulnerable against Swifty's running style, and they are likely to give up some massive plays. My top 5 ends with Travis Etienne against Buffalo. Highlighted him in my buy-sell. Check it out if you have not already. Tony Pollard is in at 6, and at 7, rounding out my second tier, is Josh Jacobs. I'll admit he has not looked great so far, but the volume is carrying him, and it will continue to do so. The Packers have the 7th lowest stuff rate, the 10th highest missed tackles allowed per attempt, and they've also struggled against gap concepts, which Jacob utilizes 2/3 of the time. Jacobs is set up to continue his upward trajectory against this Green Bay team that is allowing 26 points a game to running backs. Tier 3 starts with Devon Achane. Don't like it, actually hate it, but that is how he says it's pronounced, so we're gonna run with it. David Montgomery is at 9. He's averaging 24 touches and over 96 total yards this year. And he's also 11th in missed tackles forced per attempt. And the Panthers' run defense can be had. They have offered little resistance thus far. They've surrendered top 10 numbers in explosive runs, touchdown rate, and yards after contact per attempt. Detroit is hell-bent on keeping Monty involved, so once again, he is going to have a big-time performance. It only helps that Jahmyr Gibbs popped up on the injury report Friday evening. James Cook rounds out my top 10. At 11 and 12, I have Kyren Williams and Joe Mixon. These are both volume-based RB1 options, who have more risk than we would like as owners. The usage means that they are not going to face plant, but they probably won't have ceiling performances here either. Tier 4 starts with Breece Hall, who might be fit to explode now that he's no longer going to be limited, at least according to head coach Robert Saleh. Hall ranks 4th in explosive rate, 14th in missed tackles forced per attempt, and 2nd in yards after contact per attempt, aka the man picked up right where we left off last season. The Broncos have basically been a laughingstock defensively. They're bottom 3 in every rushing metric that matters and probably exists. Top 5 upside if those promised touches come. Jonathan Taylor is up at 14. Welcome to the rankings for the first time this season. He is a borderline must start if he is active. Obviously, there is a ton of risk here. Tennessee's front 7 has also been brutal against running backs. But Taylor has stated himself he is 100% healthy. He's also said he is ready to contribute to the team and he wouldn't be there if he wasn't. So I am not someone who is about to doubt him. If he goes, he is in my lineups. Saquon Barkley is at 15 and Aaron Jones is at 16. They are both locked into my lineups if they go. No, I am not in love with it, but it is how I feel nonetheless. At 17, I have Isaiah Pacheco against the Vikings, and at 18, it is James Conner. Guy continues to rack up snaps and touches in a consistent manner for the Cardinals. He's averaging 17.5 touches per game, 87 total yards. Now, the Bengals are allowing the 3rd highest explosive run rate and also the 2nd highest missed tackle rate per attempt, which means they can be had. Conner could easily post top 12 numbers here, which would be the 3rd time he's done it in the last 4 games. Tier 5 begins with Alvin Kamara. He is volume, and more volume, and then you hope that he hits pay dirt. New England is the 3rd best team in stuff rate. They've also allowed the 5th lowest yards per carry on zone runs, and that's all that Kamara does, so that is not a good look. I do expect 20 plus touches here again after he had 24 in his first game in 2023. Alexander Mattison rounds out my top 20. He's looked better in the last 2 weeks, even after the Cam Akers addition. At 21 is Ramondre Stevenson. He has not looked like himself this year. He ranks near the bottom in missed tackles forced per attempt and yards after contact per attempt after dominating those metrics last season. And even worse, the Saints are allowing under 13 points per game to backs, 8th fewest in the league, so the matchup isn't ideal. Dameon Pierce is in at 22. He is the last running back in Tier 5. Tier 6 starts with Najee Harris, and I have Raheem Mostert as my last RB2 in week number 5. He is no longer the lead back as expected, so hopefully you were able to sell him off when I suggested it a couple of weeks ago. Now, this matchup does project to be an excellent game script wise for Mostert. He is 5th in the league in explosive run rate and also 15th in missed tackles forced per attempt. If he gets extra touches, he could boom here against the Giants. Miles Sanders rounds out my top 25 against Detroit, and tumbling down my rankings at 26 is Jahmyr Gibbs. He does offer big time upside with this matchup, but Gibbs is a flex option only until he starts to convert some of those targets to explosive plays and touchdowns. Tier 7 starts with Gus Bus. Mr. Edwards took over as the lead back last week. He posted a 69% snap share for Baltimore. His 17 touches and 49 yards certainly were not eye-popping, but some of his other metrics were. He's 13th in explosive run rate, and he's also top 24 in yards after contact per attempt and missed tackles forced per attempt as well. Whew. In English, that basically means he is hard to bring down. The Steelers have been weak against the run all year long, and they do not match up well against gap runs. That is what Edwards prefers. Top-end flex appeal here. At 28 is Jaleel McLaughlin, and at 29, I have Jalen Warren. Tier 8 starts with A.J. Dillon, who has underwhelmed significantly. And honestly, Aaron Jones ends up playing for the Packers. Dillon is probably better off left on benches. At 31, it is Tyjae Spears. He continues to carve out a role for himself. If he is available on waivers, he shouldn't be pick him up immediately. Tyler Algier is in at 32. He is worth a spot in your lineups if you are low on options because of the solid matchup with the Texans here. Houston has allowed the 7th most points per game to rushers, and spoiler alert, the Falcons like to keep the ball on the ground and out of Desmond Ridder's hands. Samaje Perine is at 33. He is worth dart throw consideration after playing 60% of the snaps last week after Javonte Williams went down. At 34 is Chuba Hubbard, and at 35 I have Matt Breida. He is only an option if Saquon sits, and honestly I would not suggest it, but there are certainly worse plays. At 36 I have Zach Moss. He's actually a mid-tier RB2 option if Jonathan Taylor does not play. With running backs out of the way, just wide receivers and tight ends remain, so we are going to power through. My 1-1 is Justin Jet Jefferson. Who else? My second wide receiver is Tyreek Hill. He will decimate the Giants' man coverage this week. Hill has a 25% target share, 51% air yard share, and has racked up 4.75 yards per route run against the man coverage. That is New York's scheme, so brings a monster performance here after the letdown against the Bills. Tier 2 starts with Stephon Diggs. He is 7th in target share, 12th in yards per route run, and 5th in first read share. The guy is a flat-out stud. Allen will feed the beast in this game. Diggs to the moon once again. Devontae Adams is at 4, and at 5 I have A.J. Brown. At 6 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. At this point, he is doubtful to play. If he's active, you gotta start him, but likely he will be out of your lineups. Tier 3 starts with Jamar Chase at 7. He will see extra looks because T. Higgins is probably out this week with a rib injury, although he is questionable. Chase dominates zone coverage. That's something that Arizona utilizes over 60% of the time, so there is exploding a volcano type of upside here. CeeDee Lamb is at 8, and my 9th ranked wide receiver is Chris Olave. He will post a solid day against an ailing Patriots defense. They have been banged up after losing Matthew Judon as well as Christian Gonzalez. This guy has a 38.5% target share, a 38% first read share, and 3.57 yards per route run. He destroys man coverage. That is something that New England relies heavily upon. Devontae Smith rounds out my top 10, and in tier 4 kicking it off is Brandon Ayuk. He should see a ton of usage with a banged up Deebo Samuel, and he will need it because Dallas' secondary is solid. They've allowed the 4th fewest points to the wideout position. It's not going to come easy, but Ayuk still has a shot at his 3rd 120-plus yard game of the season. Puka Nacua rounds out my top 12. I still have him as a must start. I think Cooper Kupp is going to be fine this week. We'll get to him in a bit, but something just tells me it is still Puka's week, at least for this one. Michael Pittman Jr. is up at 13 because of that great matchup with Tennessee. And at 14, I have the wide receiver 1 for the Houston Texans in Nico Collins. He is a locked-in option as the current wide receiver 7 overall. He has the 3rd highest yards per route run, so even in this brutal bottom 6 matchup, I like his chances to hit. Tier 5 begins with Christian Kirk. He has a 28% target share, 31% air yard share, and 31% first read share over the last 3 games. He clearly looks like the target preference for Trevor Lawrence, and it is not even close. Jalen Waddle falls a bit this week. I have him at 16, and at 17 is Zay Flowers. He will be Lamar Jackson's number 1 option this week. The Steelers play heavy man, and Flowers shreds it. 22% target share, 23% first read share, 1.84 yards per route run, another 10 target game incoming. Headlining tier number 6, it is Calvin Ridley. He has fallen off considerably since week 1, and he carries way more risk at this point than expected. Ridley is 4th in target share and 3rd in first read share on his team. So if the usage does not pick up here, Ridley's status moving forward is going to devolve. Marquise Brown is at 13. And making my top 20 is my little Cooper Kupp. I am not going to jump in with both feet here, but it is hard/impossible to convince me that there are 20 guys better to start at wide receiver than Cooper Kupp. The reward outweighs the risk at this point. At 21, I have Garrett Wilson. He looks more playable this week than most because of the matchup with Denver. Wilson has a 26% target share, 40% air yard share, an insane 44% first read share. It's not pretty in the air for New York, at least not very often, but the usage is there for him to capitalize on. DeAndre Hopkins, nuke falls to 22, and the last wide receiver in my 6th tier. Tier 7 begins with Deebo Samuel. There are conflicting reports here, but one of them says that he is playing at less than 100%, and he also was a complete and utter decoy last year. He crushed owners who trusted him, including myself. So there is risk here once again, but my bet is that the Niners need him against the Cowboys, at least enough to make him worth the start. And for what it is worth, he was officially listed as a full participant in Friday's practice. Romeo Doubs is at 24, and up at 25 is Tank Dell. At 26, I have George Pickens. He's the last wideout in Tier 7. He has not lived up to the hype since taking over as the go-to guy in Pittsburgh. Now, the volume has been there. That has not been the problem, but he ranks just 53rd in receiving grade and 32nd in yards per route run. Now, it doesn't help that Kenny Pickett is banged up, so risky flex seems about right at this juncture. Tier 8 begins with Josh Reynolds. He could be a sneaky play because Amon-Ra is doubtful, but Reynolds himself is also dealing with a groin injury, so make sure you check that he's going prior to kickoff. I think he has legit top 15 upside if St. Brown is out and Reynolds is cleared. Adam Thielen is in at 28. He has 8 or more targets and 50 or more receiving yards in 3 straight games. He also is 21st in the league with a 30% first read share, so I am buying the safe floor that he offers. At 29 and 30, I have the Denver Broncos receivers, Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. These guys are both downgraded because of that top 3 secondary. New York allows under 20 points per game to the position, and neither one of these dudes has taken that alpha role. Tier 9 starts with Jacoby Myers, and at 32, I have Drake London against Houston. Gabe Davis is at 33. He carries more risk than reward this week against the Jags. They have been solid against the deep shot thus far. Really, that's all that Gabe Davis does at this point. Tyler Boyd is in at 34, and at 35, I have Christian Watson. There are just too many question marks about that hamstring. If he plays, if he doesn't, what is his usage going to be? Really is not worth the risk. And at 36, I have Jordan Addison. He has flashed in limited usage, but until it is consistent, this rookie should probably be a high-risk, high-reward dart throw, better off left on your bench. The final position to cover before we wrap it up is tight end. 1-1 it is Travis Kelce. 5th in targets, 2nd in target share, 2nd in red zone looks at the position. So even against this Minnesota defense that has allowed the fewest yards per reception and receiving yards to tight ends, he is a must start. At 2, it is Mark Andrews. He begins Tier 2. He has crushed the Steelers in 2 out of the last 3 games, but Pittsburgh has been great against this position all season long. I know that you are starting him no matter what. Something has to give here. I am backing Andrews. TJ Hawkinson is in at 3, and at 4, and rounding out my 2nd tier is Sam Laporta. He is 4th in target share, 2nd in yards per route run, and 3rd in fantasy points per route run. Samwise is going to continue dominating in this plus matchup, and at least for this week, I am not worried about the touches with Jameson Williams coming back. Tier 3 starts with George Kittle, and at 6, I have Dallas Goedert. Evan Ingram is at 7. He ranks 5th in target share, 11th in yards per route run, and 2nd in first read share among tight ends over the last 3 weeks. However, the Bills are second in the NFL, allowing under 5 points per game to the position, so Ingram is not going to hit his ceiling in week number 5. I will take the floor and hope for a score. My 4th tier starts with Jake Ferguson against San Francisco. You bet on the volume that has been there so far. And at 9.5, Tyler Higbee against a struggling Phillies secondary. Zach Ertz rounds out my top 10. And at 11 is Dalton Kincaid. He has finally taken over that number 1 tight end role over the past 2 weeks, and he could break out in this smash matchup. Jacksonville's allowed top 6 numbers in receiving yards, fantasy points per game, and yards per reception. So if you have been stashing him, this is the week that he starts. My last tight end 1 in week 5 is Darren Waller, who is suffering from the I have Daniel Jones as my quarterback syndrome. I heard that it is deadly. At 13 is Hayden Hurst. He is worth a shot against the Lions team that has been shredded by tight ends this year. The Lions have given up the most yardage and the second most fantasy points to the position, so fire him up. At 14 is Luke Musgrave, and my 6th and final tier has Kyle Pitts way down at 15. He was outproduced by Jonnu Smith last week, and he has not turned his 5 weekly targets into much of anything. Desmond Ridder continues to torpedo this Atlanta passing attack, so this is a bet on the talent, I suppose. At 16, my last tight end is Tyler Conklin, and that is it. All I got. Thank you for paying attention the whole time. Hope you guys learned something. Please drop your questions and your comments down below. Things can change very quickly in fantasy football land. We get new information all the time. So please do not hesitate to drop questions and comment down below. I love the engagement and getting back to you guys. One more time in case you missed it, drop a like on the video, subscribe to Relentless Press as well, hit the notifications so you do not miss anything. I'm doing 10 plus videos every single week, so there will always be content for you. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abraham Opatz, and I will see you next